I'm Jonathan Larson with the Young Turks, and this is a little bit of a postscript to the new Netflix documentary series, The Family. And I should be honest up front and say I'm only about 2 episodes into it. I think it's 5 episodes or so. But I've been aware of Jeff Charlotte's work certainly before this documentary, and I'm learning new stuff with every episode, and I am going to get caught up, and I'm actually hoping to speak with Jeff for an episode of TYTI Daily. So if there's stuff that you're interested in hearing about from Jeff, let me know in the comments, in the chat, and so on and so forth. What I thought I would do today is give a little bit of an update, because these documentaries take a little bit of time, and we've done some reporting earlier this year that my guesses won't be in the final product, even if I make it to the end, which I will. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about what we found out about the family, also known as the Fellowship Foundation. And just for some context, we started reporting on them about a year ago or so, primarily in connection to the event for which they're most well known, the National Prayer Breakfast. Presidents attend routinely, high-level members of Congress, cabinet secretaries. This is a big deal power event in Washington, D.C., and as you may recall, not coincidentally, Maria Butina and Alexander Torshin used the event very openly, in a way, to make political connections, which turned out to have been, at least according to the FBI, influenced. Their selection of who would come to the breakfast was apparently influenced by the Russian government, indicating that the elements of the Russian government, maybe the intelligence apparatus, it's not clear, were using the connections that Maria Butina, etc., had with the National Prayer Breakfast to get certain select people in there with the objective of making connections. And all of that's been publicly known. What we uncovered was that an affiliate of the family, aka the Fellowship Foundation, out in Seattle, Washington, was not only they were led by a guy named Doug Burley, who was very closely connected to the family and the Fellowship Foundation, and in fact received housing from them at some point. But not only that, and Burley, I should say, was the conduit who has spoken publicly about giving Butina the invitations that she requested. So we know he's the guy. He was the point person for Maria Butina to get these invitations into the National Prayer Breakfast. What we didn't know until our reporting brought this out was that this affiliate of the Fellowship Foundation, on its tax forms for years, reported spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on expenses related to former Soviet socialist republics, including expenses relating to bringing people to the National Prayer Breakfast. Now, we didn't get comments from anyone. We weren't able to. We tried, but we weren't able to get comments from anyone explaining why this charity would spend money on helping business people and political people attend a National Prayer Breakfast. It's a little bit unclear on the face of it why that would be a sort of an intuitive, normal, charitable activity as opposed to, say, feeding hungry people. And it's also not clear whether it's just simply, well, we waived the ticket fees for these people, which would also raise the question of, well, why? What value was it to you? And given what we know about the NRA, which was also named in the Butina affidavits by the FBI, given what we know about the funneling of money to the NRA, it also raises the question of, was money funneled to the Fellowship Foundation or its affiliates? And I will say that I spoke with, if I remember correctly, he was the head of the CIA Bureau for Russia. And he told me that Russian intelligence loves multiple aspects of this. One is the charitable aspect, and the other is the religious aspect. Both of those elements, especially in combination, mean that activities within those groups are essentially not scrutinized by American intelligence. They're leery about looking too closely about religious organizations, and the law shields a lot of charitable foundations, meaning that this is sort of an institutionalized blind spot to U.S. intelligence. And you might think that's a good thing, and there are certainly reasonable arguments to be made as to why, but given what we know about alleged Russian attempts to influence, I wouldn't say elections because that wasn't what was pertinent here. This was about influencing our politics, not so much our elections. But given what we know about their attempts to do so subversively without registering properly, it seems to me that we still have some unanswered questions about where they got their money from and why they were using it the way they did. So I should also add that everyone should go watch Netflix's The Family if they're able to. If that sort of intersection of religion and politics is of interest to you. I'm not one of those people who's going to say everyone should go watch things I like. But if you're interested in the intersection of modern conservative politics, evangelical Christianity, and international relations, this is pretty much your sweet spot. And I just wanted to sort of recap some of the elements that we found in our reporting. And there's a whole other angle to this, which maybe I'll get to in a future TYTI Daily later on this week. But with that, I'm going to say thank you, and I'm going to check out our chat box here and see if you folks have any questions for me now that I'm done rambling on. Hold on. Let's see. Channel 3-2. Oh, you guys are busy here in the chat box. Hello, everyone. DLJ says, good morning from Brisbane. I don't know where to find you anymore these days, DLJ. You are all over the place. Reptile Z says, hi, peeps. The post announcement just hit. I'm glad you were able to join us. Jack Drury says, good afternoon from the UK. Good afternoon. I was just in the UK last month. Channel 323 says, I have been watching that show, The Family. It's so crazy, and I'm definitely enjoying that show. So it's funny, like I said, I'm only 2 episodes in, but I do sort of feel like they have yet, at this point, no spoilers please, they have yet at this point to sort of establish what are the bad things that they do. And I'm not saying I'm not aware of possible criticisms along those lines. It just seems to me that for the moment, at least, the sort of everything, the wrong that they do is kind of implied by the fact that they operate in secrecy. And obviously there were some issues regarding John Ensign's affair and how they handled that and all of that. But I'm curious to see how they tell the story. Channel 323 says, sorry, Reptile Z is chiming in from Winona, Minnesota. Good morning. Channel 323 says, very fascinating stuff and just adds to some of the things I've been thinking about, but the show is a really good viewing. Let's see. Angel Dominguez Hughes, I hope I'm saying your name correctly, says the last prayer conference was a political scam. That woman that did the prayer was a hysterical mess. What the F-K was that? So when you say prayer conference, are you referring to the National Prayer Breakfast? And if so, what woman are you referring to? Because we actually had a freelance reporter there who wasn't able to get in, of course, but did speak to some people after the fact. But I'm not aware of a historical performance at the National Prayer Breakfast. And the Prayer Breakfast, of course, was the sort of premier venue where people hope to make connections. And to be clear, when I say breakfast, this is a multi-day event that has conferences and seminars and lectures and I'm sure prayer meetings as well. So they're all in private, although some of them actually, they do, to their credit, they post a fair number of them online, and looking at them was one of the helpful tools. Looking at some of those videos was one of the helpful tools for me in my reporting. Alma Nelly Salaman Velasquez says, it's either, it says technically hello. So maybe that's hola, maybe it's hello and goodbye working today. What? You can't say goodbye. Okay, channel 323 has gone on a riff here, so I'm going to read this all the way through. The funny thing is the fact that they are trying, or were trying to use Trump, and the way Trump moves, he cannot and will not praise Jesus. It's funny because all their connections are religious based and they actually pick Trump. LOL, he is soulless and not the right person to push forward their agenda. And their connections are based on Jesus, but the way the current path is going and how society is all messed up trying to control Trump with religion, now that's funny. I actually disagree with a fair number of things you say in there, but that's okay. I don't have to agree. And I can see why there's a disconnect between what we think of as stereotypical evangelical morality and the way we think of Trump in terms of especially his personal morality. But I will say that that I do think that an overlooked angle of Christianity, modern day American Christianity, is it goes back to faith, not works, right? There is a very real tradition in the Christian church, especially if you read books like Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. There's a real tradition in the Christian church, which is certainly explicitly upheld by the family, that says you don't have to be a good person. It's the crappy people who are the most, who we're most interested in. They will talk about the sinners who Jesus dealt with. They will talk about the low people Jesus dealt with, and they deal with people who have power, certainly, but they claim that all they care about is Jesus plus nothing. If you have Jesus, you don't need to be a perfect person. No one's expected to be a perfect person. So the idea that Trump has failings, is imperfect, is kind of not material to the way they see the material world, which I think is something worth keeping in mind, not necessarily because they're right, because I don't think there is a right or wrong answer here. There's your answer. But it's important to keep in mind in terms of how you think about how they think about it. Let's see what else here. Reptile Z says, controlling Trump through rule of law hasn't worked yet. Well, I don't know about that. I mean, certainly some things have worked. He's not been able to do every single thing that he's wanted. I talked last week about the car companies capitulating to California on environmental regulations, which essentially means that a lot of the Trump rollbacks of environmental regulations, emission regulations, are kind of meaningless because it's not worth the car company's time to make some cars for California standards and other cars for the other 49 states. So they'll just say, fine, we'll do it the way California wants it. In other words, whichever big state or block of states is willing to push those standards further, they win rather than Trump. So I do think there are, if you are opposed to what Trump is doing, there not only are ways to fight him, but there have been ways to win. I think we see it. We just don't talk about it quite as much as we talk about some of the losses. Bookaholic Blue, hello, Blue, or Bookaholic, I'm not sure which is your given name, says evangelicals value power and use religion to get it. Well, some do, but some don't. Jimmy Carter is an evangelical Christian. There are conservative evangelical Christians who still sort of observe that wall, between religion and politics, and say, that's an earthly thing. I'm here about my spirituality, my soul, my actions. Excuse me. So, and in fact, if you think about throughout our history, our recent modern American history, it's not been uncommon to have sort of entire schools of evangelical preachers in the news all the time. And with the exception of Jerry Falwell Jr., who doesn't even seem to be an evangelical preacher so much as he just seems to be running, I guess it's Liberty University, we don't really sort of have that class of people anymore. It seems to me anyway. They don't occupy the same space in the public imagination. So I do think we're in the middle of something like a shift in terms of the place that religion has in the American life. In some ways, certainly under Trump, it's infiltrating more so. I talked a little bit last week about religious organizations that receive federal money are now allowed to discriminate based on their religion. Well, if that's your religion, then go ahead and violate what would be illegal, violate what would be the law if you didn't believe, if it didn't derive from your belief in God. Go ahead and do it. So certainly in some ways they're winning, but if you look at the numbers and you look at the culture, it's not clear that sort of classic brand of evangelical Christian conservatism is driving the bus in a broader scale than just the temporary executive branch dominance that it has. Maybe I'm wrong. Channel 323 says, yeah, but they are perverting that and using it to manipulate the people. So T9Con says, I'll get to yours, T9Con. So Channel 323 says they're perverting that, meaning religion. And this is something I definitely want to push back on. This idea that there's right Christianity and fake Christianity and wrong Christianity and cynical Christianity. I'm not a Christian, but my understanding of religion is that essentially if you think you are, you're you're supposed to be considered the authority. And I think on the left, that's the sort of personal identity autonomy, I think, has been a value on the left, in which case it should certainly be ascribed to religion. Just because you think your view of what Christ would or would not do differs from their view, I don't think makes you sufficiently an authority to say, no, you're not a Christian. It's one thing to be technically a member of a denomination, right? The Pope can, once the Pope excommunicates you, and then you've got some basis for saying, no, you used to be a Catholic, you're not anymore. If it's a specific defined club where the club gets to define who's a member or not, that's fine. But Christianity it's everywhere, right? It's got literally new denominations just about every day. So the idea that you can say you're not Christian is specious, I think, and again, it also advances this notion, which I think is a pernicious one, that Christian equals good, right? Because usually when we say, well, they're not a Christian, what we mean is they're not a good person. I don't think they're a good person. In which case, what you're suggesting is Christians are good people, and if you're not good, then you must be in that other group, not Christian. That doesn't sound like a liberal value to me. So I think if for no other reason than to avoid conflating Christian with good, we should stop using unchristian as an insult to mean ungood. Okay. Arcane Blue says we all need to accept Pastafarianism. May his newly appendage be upon you. Yeah. Oh, I promised T9 Khan I would say that, is there anything to be hopeful about these days? And it depends on what you value and what you like. If you are opposed to the Trump administration, yeah, there are things to be hopeful about. Even if you're not opposed to the Trump administration, there are things to be hopeful about. There are certainly international crises at the moment. Hong Kong is a big, scary deal. And it's frankly amazing what those people are doing. But the fact that they're doing that, that's a reason to be hopeful. Democracy may not be in super shape, but that's more of an institutional thing. On a populist level, I think democracy is in pretty good shape, and we're seeing it. So does it look like, globally we may be in for some tough times, especially if we do end up sinking in recession? Sure, and there are going to be temptations for people to indulge in the worst of human behavior rather than rise to the best in the face of it. But to fall back on what is the Martin Luther King quote about the arc of justice is long, but the arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. I do think when you look at our progress, despite temporary dips, if that's how you see the Trump administration, the overall norms, the overall things that we consider good as a culture, as a species, those are getting better, I think. The kids are not only all right, they're better than their parents were. And, the people making fun of snowflakes in safe spaces, they are snowflakes and or have safe spaces, and they benefit from that, right? And so I think, and they're not going to be around forever. So I think we're going to have, in the future, we're going to have a species that recognizes that a safe space is a good thing, right? It's by definition, it's a good thing. You're safe here. That's good, right? That's what we strive for. So yeah, I think there's lots to be hopeful about. And every generation, it's a very human trait for everything to feel like the end of the world when you are in the world, right? If you go back and read Revelation in the Bible, right? They thought they were at the end of the world. And you don't have to look hard throughout history to find signs that that generation thought it was the end of the world for whatever reason. And certainly climate change represents a very different phenomenon than anyone else has ever had to confront. But that doesn't mean it's the end of the world. It means we're going to have challenges and we're going to have to face them. The Axis powers back in the 1930s and 40s, that was a much more imminent, immediate potential end of the world, right? It killed tens of millions of people. So, and yet things got better afterwards, not because it happened, but despite the fact that it happened. It's not. I'm not one of these people who says, "Well, we came out of it stronger, and so it's a good thing." Screw that. We came out of it weaker. It was a bad thing, but that doesn't mean that we're unable to climb out of it and to continue on. And so with that note, I'll end with what I hope is the inspiring message of, I hope you'll subscribe to our YouTube channel and like and follow us on Facebook. And if you think what we're doing has any interest to folks you know about or you think would be interested, I hope you'll share our stuff. And as always, take care of each other. There's a reason for hope. We can take care of each other, take care of yourselves. And I'll see you tomorrow, hopefully at 11:30 Eastern on the nose instead of 15, 20 minutes late like I was today. Anyway, take care. Bye, guys.